The classroom buzzed with the familiar hum of anti-gravity seats adjusting to their occupants. Marcus Chen sat in the back corner, his worn jacket a stark contrast to the sleek, iridescent uniforms worn by his classmates. The Galactic Academy's prestigious halls had welcomed students from 47 different species, each one representing the pinnacle of their civilization's youth. Marcus represented Earth, though most days he wished he didn't. Today we'll be reviewing the Battle of Kronos 12, Professor Velnara announced, her crystalline form refracting the morning light into dancing rainbows across the amphitheater walls. A textbook example of superior technology overcoming numerical disadvantage. Marcus kept his eyes fixed on his datapad, hoping to avoid the inevitable. He failed. Perhaps our human student would like to share his species' contribution to that battle. The professor's tone carried that particular edge Marcus had grown to recognize. Not quite mockery, but close enough. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Some curious, most dismissive. Thalmor, a Craxian whose family commanded 3 battle fleets, let out an audible snort. His scales rippled with barely contained amusement. Humans weren't at Kronos 12, Professor, Marcus said quietly. We didn't join the Galactic Coalition until 8 cycles later. Ah yes, how could I forget? The species that needed rescuing before they could even leave their own star system. Velnara's words drew chuckles from several students. Perhaps we should discuss battles where humanity actually participated, though those tend to be rather brief affairs. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. This was the price of being here. Earth's admission to the Academy had been controversial. Humans were seen as a charity case, a primitive species given a seat at the table out of pity rather than merit. The fact that Marcus had scored in the top percentile of the entrance exams seemed to matter little. To most, he was an anomaly, a fluke that proved nothing about his species' worth. The lesson continued, with Velnara highlighting the tactical brilliance of the Craxian admiral who had led the coalition forces. Each point she made seemed designed to emphasize the vast gulf between the advanced species and humanity. The Craxians had been spacefaring for 12,000 years, the Veltari for even longer. Humans had barely managed to colonize their own moon before making first contact. When the class finally ended, Marcus gathered his materials quickly, hoping to slip out unnoticed. Another failure. Hey, charity case. Thalmor's bulk blocked the doorway, his 3 friends flanking him like a scaled wall. My father asked me to give you a message. He wants you to know that the next shipment of relief supplies will arrive at Earth next month. He hopes your people are grateful for the Coalition's generosity. The other students filed past, some watching with interest, others with pity. None intervened. This was the social order of the Academy. The strong dominated, the weak endured. I'm sure everyone on Earth appreciates the Coalition's help, Marcus said evenly, trying to step around the larger alien. Help? Thalmor moved to block him again. It's more than help, human. It's the only reason your species hasn't collapsed back into barbarism. Without our technology, our resources, your people would still be throwing rocks at each other. Marcus felt the familiar heat rising in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting into a fight would only prove their point, that humans were too emotional, too primitive, too violent for civilized society. Excuse me, he said, pushing past with more force than necessary. The corridor outside was mercifully empty. Marcus made his way through the Academy's gleaming halls, past windows that looked out onto the impossible beauty of Station Alpha 7. The massive structure orbited a binary star system, serving as the Coalition's premier educational facility. Thousands of students from hundreds of worlds studied here, learning everything from xenobiology to fleet tactics. Marcus's quarters were small but comfortable, designed for a human's needs. The Coalition at least got that right. He dropped his bag and collapsed onto his bunk, staring at the ceiling. His datapad chimed. A message from home. His sister's face appeared, smiling despite the cramped quarters visible behind her. Earth was still recovering from the resource wars that had nearly destroyed the planet. The same wars that had been raging when the Coalition ships arrived, offering peace in exchange for submission to galactic law. Hey, big brother. Hope the geniuses are treating you well. Things are better here. The new water purification system the Coalition installed is actually working. Mom got a job at the distribution center. We're doing okay. She paused, her smile faltering slightly. I know it's hard there. I know they don't make it easy. But you're showing them what humans can do. You're showing them we're not just some primitive species that needs to be babysat. Keep your head up, Marcus. We're all proud of you." The message ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. His sister was right about one thing. He was here to prove humanity's worth. But some days, the weight of representing an entire species felt impossibly heavy. His personal terminal beeped with an incoming alert. Assignment posted for advanced strategic analysis. Marcus pulled up the details and felt his stomach sink. Group project. Randomly assigned teams. And there was his name, partnered with Thalmor and 2 others. Perfect, absolutely perfect. But as he read the assignment details, something caught his attention. They would be analyzing historical battles, identifying turning points and alternative strategies. Each team member would be required to present findings from their own species' military history. For the first time that day, Marcus smiled. If they wanted to see what humanity could do, maybe it was time to show them. Not the humanity that needed rescuing, but the humanity that had survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. The humanity that had split the atom and walked on the moon before ever knowing other intelligent life existed. The humanity that, when pushed to the brink, had always found a way to push back. Marcus opened his files and began to research. If this was his chance to prove something, he wasn't going to waste it. The others wanted to see human military history. Fine. They were about to get an education. The team meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon in one of the Academy's collaboration chambers. Marcus arrived early, his research compiled and organized. He had spent most of the night diving through Earth's military archives, carefully selecting examples that would make his point. Thalmor arrived exactly on time, flanked by their other team members. Zixara was a mantid, her insectoid features betraying no emotion as her compound eyes scanned the room. Kreenox, a gaseous being contained in an atmospheric suit, hovered near the ceiling where the environmental controls were calibrated for his species. "The human is here first. How surprising," Thalmor said, dropping his massive frame into a reinforced chair. "I expected you to need extra time just to understand the assignment." Marcus ignored the jab. "I've already started my research. I can present my findings whenever the team is ready." "Your findings?" Zixara's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You mean whatever primitive conflicts you scraped together from Earth's barbaric past? This assignment is about strategic analysis, not historical curiosity about species that barely knew how to make fire." "Humans have been making fire for over 1,000,000 years," Marcus said calmly. "But if you'd like to discuss the assignment instead of trading insults, I'm ready." Kreenox's translation device crackled. "The human shows unexpected composure. Perhaps we should proceed. I, for one, am curious about what he has prepared." Thalmor waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Fine, let's get this over with. Zixara, you go first. Show the primitive how real warfare is conducted." The mantid activated the chamber's holodisplay, and a 3-dimensional battlefield materialized above the table. "The Hive Wars, cycle year 4521. My ancestors faced an existential threat from the Scourge, a species that consumed entire worlds. This battle demonstrates the tactical superiority of coordinated hive mind operations. What followed was indeed impressive. The mantid forces moved with perfect synchronization, each unit responding instantaneously to centralized commands. There were no communication delays, no confusion, no independent errors. It was warfare as a single organism, beautiful in its efficiency. The victory was achieved with minimal casualties, Zixara concluded. 98% efficiency rating. The Scourge was eliminated from 17 systems in a single campaign cycle. Thalmor went next, presenting the Battle of Crothan, where Craxian heavy assault fleets had crushed a rebellion through overwhelming firepower and superior shielding technology. His presentation emphasized technological dominance and the importance of maintaining equipment superiority over adversaries. Kreenox shared the ethereal ascension, a conflict fought in the nebula clouds of his species' home region, where strategy consisted of manipulating gravitational fields and stellar winds to trap enemy fleets. It was warfare on a scale that made planetary battles seem quaint. Then it was Marcus's turn. "My first example is from Earth year 1940, he began, pulling up a historical map. "The location is Dunkirk, a coastal town in France. The scenario: 400,000 soldiers trapped with their backs to the sea, facing annihilation by a technologically superior enemy force." "A losing battle," Thalmor interrupted. Why waste our time with human failures? Because they didn't lose, Marcus replied, meeting the Craxians' gaze. The British military made a call for evacuation. They expected to save maybe 30,000 soldiers with their military vessels. But something unexpected happened. The holo display showed a coastline and a mass of small vessels appearing across a channel of water. Civilians answered the call. Fishermen, merchants, pleasure boat owners, people who had no military training, no obligation, no protection against enemy fire. They sailed across the English Channel in boats that were never meant for war. Some of these vessels were barely large enough to carry 10 people. Zixara leaned forward slightly. The civilians fought? No, they rescued. For 9 days, this improvised fleet made trip after trip under constant air attack. Military vessels could carry hundreds, but these small boats could navigate the shallow beaches where the soldiers were trapped. Together, they evacuated 338,000 soldiers. The military historians called it the miracle of Dunkirk. A retreat, Thalmor scoffed. You're proud of running away? I'm showing you adaptability under pressure, Marcus countered. The strategic plan failed. The technological advantage was with the enemy. By conventional military analysis, those soldiers should have died or been captured. But humans found another way. They used resources no military planner would have considered. They turned civilians into a strategic asset. Kreenox's suit hummed thoughtfully. Unconventional. Resource utilization beyond standard military parameters. Intriguing. Here's another one, Marcus continued, pulling up new data. Earth year 1942, Midway Atoll. The Japanese Imperial Navy was the most powerful fleet in the Pacific Ocean. They had more ships, better equipment, and years of combat experience. American forces were still recovering from a devastating surprise attack that had crippled their fleet months earlier. The holo display showed the opposing forces. The disparity was obvious. American intelligence broke the Japanese communication codes. They knew where and when the attack would come. But knowledge isn't enough when you're outgunned. So they created an ambush using aircraft carriers, naval aviation's most vulnerable asset, against a superior surface fleet. The battle played out in the hologram, dive bombers plummeting through flak fire, torpedoes missing targets, pilots making suicidal runs to draw fire, and then, in a span of 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers erupting in flames. The battle turned on timing, courage, and accepting catastrophic losses to achieve objective superiority at a critical moment. American torpedo bombers had an 80% casualty rate. They knew they were likely to die. They attacked anyway because their sacrifice would create an opening for the dive bombers. Acceptable loss ratios are standard military doctrine, Zixara noted. But these weren't drones or hive-controlled units, Marcus pressed. Every pilot was an individual, making an individual choice to fly into almost certain death. Not because they were mind-controlled, not because they were disposable, because they understood the strategic necessity and chose to act. The room fell silent for a moment. Marcus pulled up a third example. One more. Earth year 1968. Vietnam War, a place called Khe Sanh. American forces surrounded by an enemy force 3 times larger, under siege for 77 days. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, taking constant artillery fire. Another losing scenario, Thalmor muttered, but his attention was fixed on the display. The North Vietnamese expected the Americans to abandon the base or be overrun. Neither happened. Supply drops came daily despite enemy fire. Air support pounded enemy positions around the clock. The defenders adapted to constant bombardment, developed new tactics for survival under siege. When it ended, the base still stood. But did they win the war? Zixara asked. No, Marcus admitted. America eventually withdrew from Vietnam. But that's not the point. The point is that humans don't quit just because the situation is hopeless. We adapt, we improvise. We find ways to keep fighting even when every logical analysis says we should surrender. Thalmor stood abruptly. These examples prove nothing. Your species has been lucky, nothing more. Luck isn't strategy, isn't it? Marcus stood as well. You keep calling humanity primitive, weak, undeserving of a place in the coalition. But we survived on a planet that tried to kill us for millions of years. Ice ages, megafauna predators, diseases that wiped out entire populations. And we didn't just survive, we thrived. We spread across every environment on our planet, from frozen tundras to baking deserts. He advanced a step. You have hive minds and instant coordination. Your people have shields that can deflect plasma fire. The ethereals can manipulate gravity itself. And yes, those are incredible advantages. But humans have something else. We have the ability to look at impossible situations and refuse to accept them as impossible. Pretty words, Thalmor growled. Then how about this? Marcus pulled up one final image. A photograph from Earth's archives. This is Apollo 13, a spacecraft crippled by an explosion, losing oxygen, life support failing, 3 astronauts hundreds of thousands of kilometers from home with no way to survive. Every calculation said they would die in space. The image shifted to show engineers working around tables covered in equipment. Ground control engineers had to figure out how to make a square carbon dioxide filter fit into a round socket using only materials the astronauts had on board. They had hours to solve a problem that should have taken months of testing. And they did it. With duct tape and plastic bags and absolute refusal to let those men die. Marcus looked at each of his teammates. That's what humans do. We turn duct tape into life support systems. We turn fishing boats into a navy. We turn certain death into missions that succeed. So maybe we don't have your technology or your innate abilities, but don't ever call us primitive. We're survivors, and survivors learn to make do with what they have. The chamber was quiet. Zixara's mandibles clicked rhythmically. Kreenox's atmospheric suit hummed. Finally, Thalmor spoke. Your research is adequate. We will reconvene tomorrow to compile our joint analysis. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acceptance. But something in the Craxian's tone had shifted. Just slightly. As Marcus left the chamber, he allowed himself a small smile. It was a start. News of Marcus's presentation spread through the academy faster than he expected. By the next morning, students he had never spoken to were looking at him differently. Some with curiosity, others with renewed disdain, as if his small victory was an insult to the natural order. Professor Velnara's advanced strategic analysis class had become something different. Marcus could feel it the moment he entered. The usual pre-class chatter died down as he walked to his seat. Eyes tracked his movement. The crystalline professor stood at the front, her fasted form somehow conveying disapproval, despite lacking recognizable facial features. I've been reviewing the preliminary reports from your group projects, Velnara announced once everyone had settled. Some teams are progressing adequately. Others have submitted work that raises questions about whether students understand the fundamental principles of warfare. Her gaze settled on Marcus. Several students followed her line of sight. The human seems to believe that desperation and improvisation constitute viable military strategy, that luck and emotional determination can substitute for proper planning and technological superiority. She manipulated the classroom display, pulling up excerpts from Marcus's presentation. Let's examine these claims more critically. The Battle of Midway appeared in holographic detail above the center of the amphitheater. Here we see American forces achieving victory against a superior fleet. The human attributes this to courage and sacrifice. A more accurate analysis reveals simple probability. The Americans got lucky. Their bombers arrived at the optimal moment purely by chance. The Japanese fleet was vulnerable because of timing, not because of human ingenuity. Marcus's hands clenched beneath his desk. She was twisting his analysis, reducing complex tactical decisions to random chance. Furthermore, Velnara continued, the human celebrates massive casualties as if wasting lives is admirable. Those torpedo bomber pilots didn't make a brave choice. They made the only choice their primitive command structure allowed. A truly advanced civilization would have used drones or automated systems, eliminating the need for such waste. Thalmor spoke up from his seat. Professor, if I may. The human's presentation did raise some interesting points about resource adaptation. The classroom went silent. Thalmor defending a human? The impossible had occurred. Velnara's form seemed to sharpen, light refracting more harshly through her crystalline structure. Interesting points? Please elaborate. The Craxian shifted in his seat. The examples demonstrated flexibility in applying non-standard assets to military objectives. The civilian boat evacuation, specifically. It showed lateral thinking under pressure. Lateral thinking, Velnara repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling desperation now? The humans had no other options. They improvised because they lacked proper military infrastructure. That's not strategy, Thalmor. That's failure with a happy ending. But they did succeed, Zixara added, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. against numerical and technological disadvantages. Repeatedly, the examples showed a pattern, not isolated incidents. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. His teammates were defending his work, to a professor who clearly wanted to tear it apart. A pattern of barely surviving situations they should never have been in, Velnara countered. A pattern of species-wide recklessness that your ancestors wisely evolved beyond millennia ago. The fact that humans occasionally stumble into victory doesn't make their approach worthy of study. Kreenox's atmospheric suit flickered. With respect, Professor, that assessment seems incomplete. The human presented data on species survival in hostile environments. Earth's biosphere was remarkably dangerous compared to Mantid or Craxian homeworlds. The evolutionary pressure created different adaptations. Should we dismiss those adaptations simply because they differ from our own? The classroom atmosphere had shifted entirely. Students were leaning forward, engaged in a way Marcus had never witnessed before. This wasn't just about defending his presentation anymore. This had become something larger. Velnara's form pulsed with angry light. I see. So we're now pretending that living in caves and hunting with pointed sticks is equivalent to civilizations that mastered faster than light travel before humans learned to make fire. This is exactly the kind of misguided equality that weakens the coalition. Not all species are equal, students. That's not prejudice. That's observable fact. Marcus stood up. The movement drew everyone's attention. May I respond, Professor? By all means, human. Enlighten us with your primitive wisdom. Marcus walked down to the central floor, standing beside the holographic display. You're right that not all species are equal. The Veltari have crystal-based neural networks that process information faster than human brains. The Mantids have hive-mind coordination that humans will never achieve. The Craxians have natural armor and strength that makes them superior individual warriors. He paused, looking around the room. But you're wrong that this means humans have nothing to offer. Every species in the coalition developed under different conditions. Those conditions shaped how you think, how you fight, how you solve problems. Veltari strategy emphasizes computational perfection, because your minds work like living computers. Mantid tactics rely on instant coordination, because that's how your neural architecture functions. Craxian warfare favors direct assault because your bodies are built for it. Marcus pulled up Earth data on the display. Humans evolved on a world where we were prey as often as predators. We didn't have armor or venom or hive minds. We survived through persistence, adaptability, and social cooperation. That shaped our strategic thinking. When you see improvisation, we see creative problem solving. When you see desperation, we see determination. When you see acceptable losses, we see individuals choosing to sacrifice for the collective good. And you believe this makes humans equal to the rest of us? Velnara challenged. No, Marcus said simply. It makes us different. Complementary. The coalition brought together species with different strengths specifically because diversity creates resilience. But that only works if you actually value the differences instead of treating everything that doesn't match your approach as inferior. A student from the middle rows spoke up. A being Marcus didn't recognize, covered in bioluminescent patterns. The human makes a logical point. Coalition doctrine specifically states that strategic diversity is a defensive advantage. If all member species think identically, we become predictable to external threats. Strategic diversity is one thing, Velnara said, but there are baseline standards of civilization. Humans barely meet those standards. They required intervention to stop destroying their own planet. They needed technology transfers just to achieve basic space travel. They contribute almost nothing to coalition defenses. Yet, Marcus said, the single word hung in the air. Yet? Velnara's tone dripped skepticism. Yet, Marcus repeated. We've been part of the coalition for less than a decade. The Craxians have been members for 12,000 years. The Mantids for 9,000. You're judging humans against species that have had literally 1,000 times longer to develop. That's not a fair comparison. He advanced closer to the professor. But here's what should concern you, Professor. Humans went from first flight to landing on our moon in 66 years. From splitting the atom to fusion power in 30. From basic computers to quantum processing in 50. Our rate of advancement is exponential. We're not where the rest of you are now, but we're getting there faster than any species in coalition history. Unsustainable growth, Velnara countered. You're burning through resources at an alarming rate. Your advancement is built on unsustainable practices. Was built, Marcus corrected. Past tense. We nearly destroyed ourselves, yes, but we learned. We changed. That's another human trait. We adapt. And now we're applying that exponential growth curve to sustainable technologies, to coalition science, to everything we're learning from our allies. He looked around the classroom. In 100 years, will humans be equal to the Veltari or Craxians? Maybe not. In 1,000 years? I'd take that bet. Because we're not trying to be you. We're trying to be the best version of ourselves. And if you can't see the value in that, then maybe it's not humans who are primitive. Maybe it's your thinking. The classroom erupted. Students talking over each other, arguing, debating. Felnara's form flashed with brilliant, angry light. Enough! The professor's voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Chen, return to your seat. This discussion is over. Marcus walked back up the steps, heart pounding. He had just challenged a professor directly, in front of the entire class. That would have consequences. But as he passed by other students, he saw something unexpected. Respect. The class continued, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. Students asked questions that referenced Marcus's examples. Comparisons were drawn between human improvisation and ethereal environmental manipulation. Debates erupted about whether technological superiority was always the deciding factor in military conflicts. When the class finally ended, Marcus gathered his things quickly, expecting another confrontation. Instead, he found himself surrounded. The bioluminescent student introduced herself as Lyra Shen, from a species called the Luminara. Your presentation made me reconsider some assumptions about strategic doctrine. Would you be willing to discuss your research further? A reptilian student named Skresh nodded enthusiastically. I'm writing a thesis on unconventional warfare. Human military history might provide excellent case studies. More students crowded around, asking questions, proposing study groups, offering collaboration. Even some who had previously ignored or mocked Marcus now seemed genuinely interested in human perspectives. Thalmor pushed through the crowd, his massive form parting the gathered students like a ship through water. Marcus tensed, expecting hostility. That was well argued, the Craxian said gruffly. My father won't like it. But it was well argued nonetheless. Before Marcus could respond, Thalmor had moved on, leaving Marcus stunned. As the crowd dispersed, Zixara approached. You've created quite a disturbance, human. Felnara will not forget this. I know, Marcus said. Good. The mantid's compound eyes glittered with something that might have been approval. The Academy has been stagnant for too long. Perhaps it needed a primitive to remind us that evolution isn't finished, not for any of us. Walking back to his quarters later, Marcus checked his messages. Another one from his sister, celebrating small victories back on Earth. A note from Kreenox about scheduling additional team meetings. An official notification that his presentation had been flagged for review by the Academic Standards Committee. And one message from an address he didn't recognize. Opening it revealed a simple text. Well done, Mr. Chen. Some of us have been waiting for someone to say what needed to be said. The Academy will try to silence you. Don't let them. The message was signed with coordinates that traced back to Professor Rindahl, who taught military history and, according to rumor, had served in the Coalition fleet before retiring to academic life. Marcus smiled. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. But for the first time since arriving at the Academy, he didn't feel like he was fighting alone. The Academic Standards Committee hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Marcus spent those days buried in research, preparing for questions he knew would come. His quarters became an archive of human history, military tactics, cultural evolution, and technological development timelines. He barely slept. On the morning of the hearing, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Professor Rindahl stood at his door, the elderly Saurian leaning heavily on a walking staff that seemed more ceremonial than necessary. His scales were faded with age, but his eyes remained sharp and intelligent. May I enter, Mr. Chen? Marcus stepped aside, suddenly aware of the chaos his room had become. Data pads scattered across every surface, holographic displays frozen mid-presentation, empty food containers stacked in corners. Rindahl surveyed the mess with what might have been amusement. Preparing for war, I see. Good. The committee won't go easy on you. Felnara has significant influence and you've wounded her pride. I just presented facts, sir. Facts are weapons in the wrong hands, or the right ones. Rindahl moved to the window overlooking the station's central atrium. I served in the Coalition fleet for 43 years. I've fought in 17 major conflicts and more skirmishes than I can remember. I've commanded forces against pirates, rebels, and one genuine existential threat to Coalition space. He turned to face Marcus. In all that time, I learned one fundamental truth about warfare. Victory doesn't always go to the strongest or the most advanced. It goes to those who adapt fastest to changing circumstances. You understand this. Velnara doesn't. She represents an old guard that believes technological and biological superiority are destiny. They're not. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to face them today and they'll try to break you. They'll question every example you provided. They'll demand proof that human achievements weren't just luck. They'll paint your species as dangerous primitives who succeeded through recklessness rather than skill. Rindal's staff tapped against the floor, and if you let them control the narrative, they'll win. What should I do? Turn the narrative back on them. The committee isn't just judging your presentation. They're judging whether humans belong at this academy. Show them that the question itself is flawed. The academy doesn't bestow worth. It recognizes worth that already exists. Make them prove why humans should be excluded rather than proving why you should be included. The old professor moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. There are more of us than you think. Faculty who believe the coalition has grown complacent. Students who are tired of being told that progress means becoming more like the Veltari or Craxians. You've given them a voice, Mr. Chen. Don't let the committee silence it. The hearing room was smaller than Marcus expected. A semicircular table dominated the space with 5 committee members seated behind it. Velnara occupied the center position, flanked by professors Marcus recognized from various departments. Only Rindal was absent, likely disqualified due to his message of support. A handful of students sat in observation seats along the wall. Marcus spotted Thalmor, Zixara, and Kreenox among them. Lyrishan and several others had also come. Their presence steadied his nerves. Mr. Chen, Velnara began, her crystalline voice filling the room. You stand before this committee because your recent presentation violated academic standards in multiple ways. You presented biased analysis, drew unsupported conclusions, and made inflammatory statements about coalition member species. Do you understand the severity of these charges? I understand the charges, Professor. I don't agree with them. A Veltari committee member named Shakara spoke next. Your presentation celebrated military failures as if they were victories. Dunkirk was a retreat. The Americans at Midway took catastrophic losses. Quezon was abandoned eventually. These are not examples of superior strategy. They're examples of tactical flexibility and strategic resilience, Marcus countered. Dunkirk saved an army that went on to win a war. Midway turned the tide of the Pacific Campaign. Quezon demonstrated that siege warfare had become obsolete against determined defenders, with adequate supply lines. The outcomes matter more than the specific circumstances. The outcomes were luck, Velnara insisted. Luck that happened repeatedly across thousands of years of human history. Marcus pulled up his datapad. I have documented evidence of similar patterns in over 200 major conflicts. Human forces achieving victories against superior opponents through adaptation, improvisation, and unconventional thinking. At what point does luck become capability? A Craxian committee member, Gorshak, leaned forward. You claim humans possess unique strategic abilities, yet your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times. Your world wars were catastrophically inefficient. Your resource management was so poor that the coalition had to intervene to prevent ecological collapse. How do you reconcile celebrated military success with near-extinction level incompetence? The question hit hard because it was true. Marcus felt the weight of his species' failures pressing down. But then he remembered Rindal's advice. Turn the narrative. You're right, Marcus said. Humans nearly destroyed ourselves. Multiple times. We developed weapons capable of ending all life on our planet, and we came terrifyingly close to using them. We poisoned our air and water. We fought wars over resources we were actively depleting. We made every mistake a species could make. He met Gorshak's gaze directly. And we're still here. That's not incompetence. That's the ultimate proof of human resilience. We stood at the brink of extinction and stepped back. Not because the coalition saved us. The coalition arrived after we had already started fixing the problems. We saved ourselves. You're glorifying survival instinct, Velnara said. I'm recognizing that survival instinct is a strength, not a weakness. Every species represented in this room had evolutionary advantages that made space travel easier. The Veltari developed faster-than-light theory, because your crystal matrices can perform quantum calculations organically. The Crexians built ships that could withstand the void, because your bodies naturally resist radiation. The Mantids achieved perfect crew coordination because you're literally connected to each other. Marcus stood up, unable to contain his energy. Humans had none of that. We had soft bodies that die in vacuum, brains that work too slowly for real-time quantum math, individuals who constantly disagree with each other. And we got to space anyway. We figured out physics that our brains weren't evolved to understand. We built technology to overcome every biological limitation we had. We achieved in centuries what it took other species millennia to accomplish. With massive resource expenditure and unacceptable casualty rates, Shakara noted, yes, because we didn't have the luxury of taking thousands of years to develop carefully. We developed fast because we had to. Competition between nations drove innovation. The threat of extinction forced cooperation. The very flaws you're criticizing are what pushed us to advance so rapidly. A luminary committee member who hadn't spoken yet raised a glowing appendage. Your presentation suggested that coalition military doctrine could benefit from studying human strategies. That's a remarkable claim for someone whose species has never fought in a coalition conflict. Can you support it? This was the question Marcus had been preparing for. Coalition military doctrine is built around technological and numerical superiority. Your strategies assume you'll have better ships, better weapons, better shields than your opponents. That's been true for most of coalition history because you were fighting pirates and minor rebellions, forces that couldn't match you technologically. He pulled up a star chart. But the coalition is expanding into new regions. You're encountering species you've never met before. Some of them have technologies you don't understand. The Jarn Collective has biological ships that don't register on conventional sensors. The Void Priests manipulate dark matter in ways that bypass energy shields. You're entering conflicts where you might not have technological superiority. Marcus highlighted several recent skirmishes at the coalition's outer borders. Your forces have struggled in these encounters. Not because coalition soldiers aren't brave or skilled, but because they're trained to fight from a position of strength. They don't know how to adapt when that strength is neutralized. And humans do? Gorshak's tone was skeptical. Humans have been fighting from positions of weakness for our entire history. We've spent thousands of years learning how to win when we're outmatched. That's the value we bring to the coalition, not better technology, not superior biology, but experience in making the impossible work anyway. The committee members exchanged glances. Marcus could see doubt warring with curiosity in their reactions. Belnara's form pulsed with light. Even if we accept your premise, which I don't, there's a larger issue. Your presentation and your statements today demonstrate a fundamental disrespect for coalition hierarchy and academic protocol. You've challenged established doctrine. You've questioned the competence of senior faculty. You've implied that species with millennia more development than humans are somehow limited in their thinking. This isn't just about academic standards anymore. It's about whether you possess the temperament suitable for this academy. There it was. The real threat. Not about his presentation at all, but about forcing him out entirely. Marcus felt anger rising but forced it down. Getting emotional would prove their point. Instead, he thought about his sister's message. About Earth struggling to rebuild. About being the representative of his entire species. Professor Velnara, with respect, questioning established doctrine is what education is supposed to do. If the coalition wanted students who simply memorize and repeat what they're told, you wouldn't need an academy. You just need a database. The entire point of bringing together different species is to challenge each other's assumptions. To learn from different perspectives. To become better than we would be separately. He looked at each committee member in turn. If I've shown disrespect, I apologize. But I won't apologize for presenting human perspectives, even when they contradict coalition orthodoxy. That's not disrespect. That's exactly what you asked for when you admitted humans to this academy. You wanted to see what we could contribute. Well, this is it. We contribute by asking difficult questions, by offering alternatives to established thinking, by being the voice that says maybe there's another way. The room fell silent. Marcus stood there, heart pounding, waiting for judgment. Finally, the luminary committee member spoke. I move that we defer decision on this matter pending further review. The human raises points that deserve deeper consideration rather than immediate dismissal. Seconded. Gorshok said, surprising everyone. Velnara's form flashed angrily, but committee rules were clear. With 2 votes for deferral, the hearing was suspended. This committee will reconvene in 1 week, Velnara announced stiffly. Mr. Chen, you are dismissed. Do not interpret this deferral as approval of your conduct. As Marcus left the hearing room, the observing students mobbed him. Questions flew from all directions. Thalmore's massive hand landed on his shoulder, surprisingly gentle. You didn't back down, the Craxian said with something like approval. My father always says that warriors are defined not by their victories, but by what they do when facing certain defeat. You stood your ground, Zixara clicked her mandibles in agreement. The committee is divided. That's unprecedented. You've accomplished more than you realize. Walking through the academy corridors afterward, Marcus felt exhausted but also strangely energized. The fight wasn't over, but something fundamental had shifted. The question was no longer whether humans deserved to be here. The question was whether the academy was ready to change. The week following the hearing transformed the academy in ways Marcus hadn't anticipated. His presentation had become required reading in 3 different courses, distributed not by the administration, but through student networks. Informal study groups formed to discuss human military history. The Academy's library reported unprecedented interest in Earth's cultural archives. Not everyone was pleased with these developments. Marcus was walking to the dining commons when he encountered a group of senior students blocking the corridor. Their body language made their intentions clear before anyone spoke. A tall Veltari named Krishna, whose family held significant political influence in the Coalition Council, stepped forward. The human who thinks he's special, Krishna said, his crystalline voice dripping with contempt. You've caused quite a disruption. Some of us think it's time to remind you of your place. Marcus assessed the situation quickly. 6 of them, all larger or more physically capable than a human. The corridor was empty of other students. No witnesses. No help coming. My place is as a student at this academy, Marcus said evenly. Same as yours. No, not the same at all. Krishna moved closer. You see, my family has sponsored coalition advancement for over 3,000 years. We've funded exploration missions, military research, educational programs. My lineage has earned the right to be here. Your species was handed admission out of pity. The other students closed in, forming a circle. Marcus's mind raced through options. Fighting back would be catastrophic. Even if he somehow won, which was unlikely, he'd be expelled for violence. But submitting to intimidation would set a precedent he couldn't afford. You're right that your family has contributed to the coalition, Marcus said carefully. 3,000 years of service is impressive, but that's your family's achievement, not yours. What have you personally accomplished? Besides blocking corridors to threaten students who challenge your worldview? Krishna's form pulsed with angry light. One of his companions, a hulking Craxian, grabbed Marcus by the jacket and lifted him off the ground. You need to learn respect, human. Put him down. The voice came from behind the circle. The students turned to find Thalmore standing there, flanked by Zixara and a dozen other students Marcus recognized from various classes. The Craxian holding Marcus hesitated. This doesn't concern you, Thalmore, Krishna said. Actually, it does. Marcus is my teammate. We have a project due tomorrow. If he's too injured to contribute, our entire team's grade suffers. So yes, this concerns me very much. Thalmore stepped forward, his bulk making even the large Craxian look small. Put him down. The Craxian released Marcus, who dropped to the floor. Krishna's group backed away slowly, their intimidation attempt foiled by unexpected interference. This isn't over, Krishna warned as they left. Probably not, Thalmore agreed. But it's over for today. Marcus dusted himself off, checking for damage. You didn't have to do that, I know. I wanted to. Thalmore gestured to the other students. We all did. You've made people think, Marcus. That makes you valuable. Worth protecting. Zixara approached, her compound eyes reflecting concern. Krishna's family has significant influence. He'll try other methods to silence you. You should be careful. I'll be careful, Marcus promised. But I won't be silent. The dining commons buzzed with conversation as Marcus entered later that evening. He grabbed a tray of food calibrated for human nutritional needs and looked for a place to sit. To his surprise, several tables waved him over. He chose one where Lyrishan sat with a mixed group of students from various species. Marcus. Perfect timing. Lyrishan's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with excitement. We're debating the applications of human tactical philosophy to current coalition military challenges, specifically, how improvisation doctrine could address the Void Priest problem. Marcus settled into his seat, suddenly surrounded by eager faces. A young mantid named Zixtar leaned forward. The Void Priests manipulate dark matter to create zones where conventional sensors don't work. Coalition forces can't target what they can't see. But humans fought wars in similar conditions, correct? Before you had advanced sensors? We did, Marcus confirmed. Submarines in the old world wars operated in environments where neither side could see each other directly. They developed tactics based on sound, pattern recognition, and predictive analysis rather than visual targeting. Explain, demanded a Craxian student Marcus didn't know. For the next hour, Marcus found himself teaching an impromptu seminar on submarine warfare, sonar technology, and the cat and mouse games played in the ocean depths. The students listened intently, asking questions, drawing parallels to space combat, discussing applications. This happened again the next day, and the day after. Marcus's quarters became a gathering place for students interested in human strategies. His datapad filled with messages requesting study sessions, asking for reading recommendations, proposing collaborative research projects. Professor Rindal observed this phenomenon with quiet satisfaction. He visited Marcus again 3 days before the committee's scheduled reconvene. "You're building something here," the old Saurian said, watching as a group of students left Marcus's quarters after a lengthy discussion about guerrilla warfare principles. "A movement, perhaps, or at least the beginning of one. I'm just answering questions. You're doing much more than that. You're demonstrating that human perspectives have value. Every conversation, every study session, every time you help a student understand a concept from a different angle, you're proving that diversity of thought strengthens the coalition. The committee can't ignore that." Marcus pulled up a chair, suddenly exhausted. "But will it be enough? Velnara wants me gone. Kreshna's family has influence. I'm one human against an entire system that's convinced humans don't belong. You're not alone anymore. Look at what you've built in just 1 week. Students who barely acknowledged your existence are now defending you, learning from you, treating you as an equal. Even Thalmor, whose father is one of the most traditionalist members of the council, has become your ally. That's not nothing, Marcus. That's everything." Rindal stood to leave, then paused at the door. "The committee meeting will be contentious. Velnara won't give up easily. But remember this. The Academy's mission statement, written when the coalition was first formed, says that its purpose is to cultivate excellence through diversity, preparing the next generation to face challenges we cannot yet imagine. You're forcing them to live up to those words. That's threatening to those who prefer the comfortable status quo." The next day brought unexpected news. The committee had announced that their reconvened hearing would be open to the entire Academy. Any student or faculty member could attend and observe. Furthermore, they had expanded the scope of the hearing to address broader questions about curriculum standards and the inclusion of diverse strategic philosophies. "Velnara is trying to make this bigger than just you," Zixara explained when she brought Marcus the news. "She wants to turn it into a referendum on whether human perspectives should be taught at all. If she wins, she can purge not just you but everything you've introduced. And if you win, the Academy changes. Human military history becomes part of standard curriculum. Other marginalized perspectives get heard. The old guard loses their monopoly on what's considered valid strategic thinking." Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about his academic survival anymore. It was about whether the Coalition Academy would truly embrace diversity or just pay lip service to it. He spent the next 2 days preparing, not just reviewing his previous research but expanding it. He gathered case studies from other human achievements beyond warfare, scientific breakthroughs achieved with limited resources, diplomatic victories secured through creative negotiation, engineering solutions that shouldn't have worked but did. The night before the hearing, Marcus received a message from Earth. His mother's face appeared on screen, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Marcus, we heard about what's happening. The whole planet is watching. Every news feed is covering your hearing. You've become a symbol of something bigger than just one student fighting academic bureaucracy. You're showing them that humanity belongs at their table, that we have something to contribute." She wiped her eyes. "I know the pressure must be terrible, but I want you to know that no matter what happens tomorrow, we're proud of you. You've already accomplished more than we ever dreamed. You've made them see us. Really see us. Not as charity cases or primitives, but as equals. Win or lose tomorrow, you've already changed everything." The message ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The weight of representing an entire species felt crushing. But alongside that weight came something else. Purpose. Determination. The same stubborn refusal to quit that had defined humanity throughout its history. Tomorrow, the committee would try to silence human perspectives. They would argue that the old ways were the only ways. They would attempt to maintain a system that made some species superior and others inferior. Marcus checked his notes one final time, then tried to sleep. Tomorrow would be the most important day of his life, not just for him, but for every human who dared to dream of standing equal among the stars, for every marginalized species that the Coalition had welcomed in theory, but diminished in practice. The alarm woke him before dawn. Marcus dressed carefully in his academy uniform, making sure everything was perfect. He reviewed his presentation one last time, then walked to the hearing chamber. The corridor outside was already crowded. Students lined the walls, waiting for the doors to open. Faculty members clustered in small groups, discussing in hushed tones. Security personnel stood at the entrances, monitoring the unprecedented crowd. Thalmor found Marcus in the crowd. The main auditorium had to be opened. Too many people wanted to attend for the original hearing room. "This is unprecedented. The whole academy is watching." Marcus swallowed hard. No pressure then. "None at all," Thalmor said with what might have been a Crassian smile. "Just the future of the Coalition's educational philosophy riding on what happens in the next few hours." The doors opened. The crowd surged forward, and Marcus Chen, a human from a species barely a decade into galactic civilization, walked forward to face judgment. Behind him, watching with hope and concern, came representatives from 47 different species, all waiting to see if the Coalition would finally live up to its own ideals, or if the old guard would win, and diversity would remain just a word in mission statements rather than a living reality. The main auditorium was designed to hold 500 occupants. Over 700 had crammed inside, with more watching through live feeds and overflow rooms throughout the academy. The committee sat on an elevated platform, their 5 seats arranged in a semicircle. Behind them, a massive display screen dominated the wall, ready to show evidence and presentations. Marcus stood alone at a podium in the center of the floor, surrounded by tiers of seats rising on all sides. The arrangement felt deliberately intimidating, like standing in the bottom of a pit while judges and spectators looked down from above. Belnara called the hearing to order, her crystalline form refracting the overhead lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. "This committee reconvenes to address matters raised in our previous session. However, given the widespread interest in these proceedings, we have expanded our scope. Today we will determine not only the fate of Mr. Chen's controversial presentation, but also examine whether the Academy's curriculum adequately represents diverse strategic perspectives." She paused, her form pulsing with light. "We will hear from multiple witnesses, review extensive evidence, and render judgment on whether current standards serve the Coalition's best interests. Mr. Chen, you will present first. You have 30 minutes to defend your position." Marcus activated his datapad, and the display screen behind the committee came to life. "Thank you, Professor. I'd like to begin by addressing the fundamental question underlying these proceedings. Not whether my presentation was technically correct, but whether human perspectives have inherent value in Coalition strategic education." He pulled up a timeline showing human technological development. Humans have been part of the Coalition for 9 years. In that time, we've gone from requiring life support assistance on alien worlds to adapting Coalition environmental technology for our own use. We've contributed to 17 joint research projects. Human engineers have improved efficiency on Coalition mining operations by 14% through unconventional equipment applications. "Minor contributions," Belnara interrupted. "Hardly evidence of strategic value." "I'm establishing context," Marcus continued. "Human adaptation speed is exceptional. But more importantly, I want to discuss why that adaptation speed exists. It's because humans are specialists at learning from others. We don't have the computing power of Veltari neural matrices. We don't have mantid hive coordination. We don't have Craxian natural resilience, so we compensate by being extremely good at studying, understanding, and integrating approaches that didn't originate with us. He shifted the display to show human cultural history. Throughout our history, human civilizations that succeeded were those that borrowed ideas from neighbors and improved them. Chinese innovations spreading to Europe, European technologies adapted in Japan, American culture synthesizing influences from dozens of immigrant populations. We're not just adaptable, we're synthesizers. We take disparate ideas and combine them into something new. Marcus looked directly at the committee. That's what I was doing in my presentation. Not saying human warfare is superior to coalition doctrine, saying that human experiences offer additional tools that coalition strategists currently lack. When you only learn one way to solve problems, you become vulnerable to situations where that one way doesn't work. The luminary committee member, whose name Marcus had learned was Vareth, leaned forward. Can you provide specific examples of how human strategic approaches could address current coalition challenges? Marcus had been hoping for this question. He pulled up classified intelligence reports that Professor Rindal had helped him access through proper channels. The Void Priests. Coalition forces have engaged them 7 times in the past year. We've lost 3 ships, suffered heavy casualties on 2 more, and achieved only 1 stalemate. 0 victories. This is unprecedented in recent coalition military history. The Void Priests possess unique capabilities, Gorshak said defensively. Dark matter manipulation that our sensors can't track. They create zones where our targeting systems fail. Exactly. Your sensors fail. Your targeting systems fail. Your technology fails. So coalition forces, trained to rely on technological superiority, don't know how to adapt. Marcus pulled up data on submarine warfare. Humans fought wars underwater where sensors were unreliable and targeting was difficult. We developed tactics for fighting blind, acoustic tracking, pattern analysis, predictive movement, fighting based on probability and educated guessing rather than perfect information. He advanced to the next slide. Submarines would ping sonar to get location data, but that ping revealed their own position. So they learned when to go active and when to remain silent, when to trust instruments and when to trust intuition, when to engage and when to evade. These are skills coalition forces haven't needed to develop because your technology has been reliable, until now. Vareth's luminescent patterns flickered with interest. You're suggesting coalition naval doctrine should incorporate human submarine tactics? I'm suggesting coalition forces should learn the principles underlying those tactics. How to fight when your advantages are neutralized. How to operate effectively with incomplete information. How to win through unconventional approaches when conventional ones fail. That's not specifically human. That's universal military theory that humans happen to have extensive experience with. Velnara's form flashed with irritation. Even if we accept this premise, which I don't, there's a larger issue. You're presenting human military history as if it's something to be celebrated. But human warfare was barbaric. Massive civilian casualties, weapons of indiscriminate destruction, war crimes that violated every principle of civilized conduct. Should we really be learning from species that committed genocide as military policy? The accusation hung in the air. Marcus felt the weight of human history pressing down. She wasn't wrong. Humanity had done terrible things. You're right, Marcus said quietly. Human warfare was often barbaric. We committed atrocities. We developed weapons designed to maximize suffering. We treated civilians as acceptable casualties. We did things that shame us to this day. He paused, meeting Velnara's gaze. But we learned. We developed rules of war, Geneva Conventions, international law. We recognized that unlimited warfare was unsustainable and immoral. We built institutions to prevent the worst excesses. We didn't eliminate warfare, but we civilized it. We took our capacity for violence and bounded it with ethics and law. Marcus pulled up data showing human rights development. That evolution, from unrestricted violence to rules-based warfare, is part of human strategic thinking, too. The recognition that how you fight matters as much as whether you win, that some victories aren't worth the cost, that maintaining ethical boundaries even under pressure is what separates civilization from barbarism. He turned to address the auditorium at large. Every species here has ugly history. The Craxians had the Purge Wars. The Mantids went through the hive consolidation that eliminated 17 subspecies. The Veltari had the crystal-shattering civil conflict. Every species that survived long enough to reach space has blood in their past. The question isn't whether we made mistakes. It's whether we learned from them. A new voice spoke from the audience. Professor Rindal stood slowly, addressing the committee. If I may, I'd like to speak to this point. I've studied military history across 43 species for over 60 years. Every successful military culture goes through similar evolution. Early warfare is brutal and unrestricted. As societies advance, they develop codes of conduct, rules that limit excess while still allowing for defense and conflict resolution. The old Saurian moved to stand beside Marcus. Humans are not unique in having violent history. They're unique in how quickly they evolved past unrestricted violence. From the First Geneva Convention to functional international criminal courts in less than a century, most coalition species took millennia to develop equivalent institutions. Human strategic thinking includes both the capacity for effective warfare and the ethical framework to constrain it. Both aspects have value. Velnara began to respond, but Shakara, the Veltari committee member, interrupted. Professor Rindal raises an important point. We've been focusing on whether human tactics are effective. But strategic education is about more than just winning battles. It's about understanding the relationship between military force and societal values. If humans developed ethical constraints on warfare faster than other species, that's relevant to strategic education. Thank you, Professor Shakara, Marcus said. That's exactly the larger point I'm trying to make. Strategy isn't just tactics and weapons. It's understanding why you fight, how you fight, and what costs you're willing to accept. Different species approach these questions differently because they evolved under different pressures. Learning from those differences makes all of us better strategists. He pulled up his final presentation slide. I'm not asking this committee to declare human warfare superior to coalition doctrine. I'm asking you to recognize that human experiences, perspectives, and approaches have value. That strategic diversity strengthens rather than weakens coalition military capability. That the Academy's mission to cultivate excellence through diversity should mean more than just having different species in the same classroom. Marcus took a breath. I'm asking you to admit that maybe, just maybe, a species that survived by adapting and improvising for millions of years might have something to teach civilizations that survived through technological and biological superiority, not to replace what you know, to supplement it, to give you tools for situations where your traditional advantages don't apply. The auditorium erupted in applause. Not from everyone. Many sat silent or hostile. But enough students and faculty showed support that the sound echoed through the massive chamber. Velnara called for order, her form pulsing with barely controlled anger. The committee will now hear from additional witnesses. We call Professor Dalrex, Chair of Military Strategy Studies. Dalrex was an elderly Craxian, scarred from years of combat service before joining the Academy. He approached the witness platform with the careful deliberation of someone who chose words carefully. I've reviewed Mr. Chen's presentation in detail, Dalrex began. I've also spent the past week reviewing human military history that he didn't include in his original work. My conclusion is that his analysis is fundamentally sound. Humans developed strategic approaches that coalition doctrine lacks, not because coalition doctrine is wrong, but because it's incomplete. Velnara's form flashed with surprise. Professor Dalrex, are you saying you support changing curriculum to include human perspectives? I'm saying that any strategic education that ignores relevant case studies is incomplete. Human history provides extensive examples of fighting from disadvantaged positions, of adapting to superior opponents, of winning through unconventional means. These are valuable case studies regardless of one's opinion about human civilization. But the barbarism, Velnara pressed, the civilian casualties, the atrocities, are relevant case studies in what not to do, Dalrex countered. We teach coalition history, including the Purge Wars and the Hive Consolidation. We don't celebrate the atrocities committed during those conflicts. We study them to understand how military strategy can go wrong when ethical constraints fail. Human warfare provides additional examples of both successful strategies and cautionary tales. Both have educational value. The hearing continued for another 3 hours. More witnesses testified. Arguments raged about curriculum standards, diversity requirements, and what constituted valid strategic thinking. Students in the audience debated among themselves, their discussions sometimes drowning out the official proceedings. Finally, as the station's artificial sun began its evening cycle, Belnara called for order. The committee will now deliberate. We will render judgment within the hour. This hearing stands in recess. The committee filed out through a side door. The audience remained, buzzing with speculation and debate. Marcus collapsed into a chair that Thalmor provided, suddenly exhausted. You did well, the Craxian said. Whatever happens now, you presented your case with strength and intelligence. My father would approve even if he'd never admit it. Zixara approached with water calibrated for human biology. The committee is divided. Gorshak and Vareth clearly support you. Felnara opposes. Shakara and Dalrex are uncertain. It could go either way. Marcus drank gratefully, his throat raw from hours of speaking. Around him, students continued their debates. He caught fragments of conversation, some dismissive of his arguments, others enthusiastically supportive, many somewhere in between, genuinely wrestling with questions they'd never considered before. Hey, human. Kreshna stood nearby, his crystalline form somehow less hostile than before. That was well argued. I don't agree with all of it, but it was well argued. It was the closest thing to respect Marcus had received from the Veltari senior. He nodded acknowledgement, too tired for more. The wait stretched endlessly. Marcus watched the time display creep forward. 50 minutes passed, then 55. Finally, at the 60-minute mark, the side door opened. The committee filed back in. Their expressions, where species had expressions, were unreadable. The audience fell silent with anticipation. Velnara stood at the center of the committee platform. Her crystalline form seemed dimmer somehow, less vibrant than before. When she spoke, her voice carried defeat rather than triumph. The committee has reached a decision. The auditorium held its breath. 700 beings from 47 different species waited in absolute silence for the words that would define the Academy's future. Marcus stood at the central podium, hands gripping the edges to keep them from trembling. Velnara's crystalline form caught the overhead lights, casting fragmented rainbows across the floor. After extensive deliberation, this committee has reached the following conclusions. First, regarding the specific charges against Mr. Chen's presentation, we find that while his analysis challenged established doctrine, it did not violate academic standards. His research was thorough, his examples were historically accurate, and his conclusions, while controversial, were logically derived from the evidence presented. A murmur rippled through the audience. Felnara raised a hand for silence. Second, regarding the broader question of curriculum standards and strategic diversity, the committee finds that current academy doctrine has become unnecessarily rigid. The Coalition's founding principle of cultivating excellence through diversity has been honored more in theory than in practice. This represents a failure of our educational mission. Velnara paused, and for the first time her voice carried something other than certainty. Perhaps it was resignation, or maybe acceptance. The committee therefore mandates the following changes, effective immediately. Human military history will be incorporated into the Advanced Strategic Analysis curriculum as a formal unit of study. This will be taught not as exceptional or primitive, but as one of multiple valid strategic perspectives that students should understand. The auditorium erupted, some cheering, some protesting, all reacting to the seismic shift in academy policy. Marcus felt his legs weaken with relief.
He had won.
Humanity had won, but Velnara wasn't finished. Furthermore, the committee mandates a comprehensive review of all strategic curricula to identify other marginalized perspectives that should be included. This review will be conducted by a diverse faculty committee, to be formed within the next academic cycle. The goal is to ensure that the Academy truly represents the strategic diversity of all Coalition member species, not just those who have held influence longest. Professor Rindal stood in the audience, his scarred face showing satisfaction. Professor Dalrex nodded approvingly from his seat. Even some faculty members who had seemed hostile earlier appeared thoughtful rather than angry. Finally, Velnara continued, her voice growing stronger. The committee acknowledges that this hearing revealed uncomfortable truths about institutional bias within the Academy. The treatment Mr. Chen received, both in formal academic settings and through informal social pressure, reflects poorly on our commitment to equality among species. The committee recommends a thorough review of student conduct policies and faculty training on diversity and inclusion. She turned her gaze directly to Marcus. Mr. Chen, Your presentation and your defense of it today challenged this institution to live up to its stated values. While your approach was at times confrontational, confrontation was necessary. This committee apologizes for the bias you have experienced and commends you for your perseverance in the face of institutional resistance. You have reminded us all that the Coalition's strength lies not in the superiority of any one species, but in the collective capabilities we develop by learning from each other. The auditorium exploded with applause. Students rose to their feet, the sound of approval washing over Marcus in waves. Thalmore's massive hand clapped his shoulder hard enough to stagger him. Zixara's mandibles clicked in a complex pattern that Marcus had learned meant deep approval. Kreenox's atmospheric suit hummed with what might have been laughter or joy. Velnara waited for the noise to subside. This hearing is concluded. Mr. Chen, you are free to continue your studies without restriction. I suggest you use your newfound influence wisely. As the committee filed out, students mobbed Marcus. Questions flew from all directions. Congratulations mixed with debates about what the decision meant. Some students who had been hostile before now approached with grudging respect. Others who had been allies celebrated as if they had personally won a great victory. Through the chaos, Marcus spotted Lyra Shen, whose bioluminescent patterns pulsed with excitement. You did it. You actually changed Academy policy. This is unprecedented. We did it, Marcus corrected. All of us who refused to accept that things couldn't change. Kreshna pushed through the crowd, his crystalline form catching the light. I underestimated you, human. I thought you were just another primitive making noise. I was wrong. What you accomplished here today will echo through the Coalition for generations. I hope so, Marcus said. Because this isn't just about humans. It's about every species that's been marginalized or dismissed. Every perspective that's been ignored because it didn't fit the established narrative. Professor Rindal finally reached Marcus, leaning heavily on his ceremonial staff. Walk with me, Mr. Chen. There's something you should see. They made their way through the celebrating students, out of the auditorium, and up to one of the station's observation decks. The transparent dome offered a breathtaking view of the binary star system, with Coalition ships moving like fireflies against the cosmic backdrop. Look out there, Rindal said, gesturing to the vast expanse of space. 57 member species, thousands of worlds, trillions of beings, all part of the Coalition. And today, one human student reminded us why we formed this alliance in the first place. Marcus stared at the stars, feeling the weight of what had happened beginning to settle. I just presented some historical examples, Professor. I didn't mean to start a revolution. Revolutions rarely begin with grand intentions. They begin when someone refuses to accept injustice as normal. Rindal turned to face him. Do you know why I supported you? Not just because your research was sound, though it was, but because I've watched the Coalition grow complacent. We've become an empire of the established, where the same species dominate, the same perspectives prevail, and new voices are tolerated but not truly heard. The old Saurian's eyes reflected the starlight. You changed that. Not completely, not permanently, but you proved it could be changed. You showed that merit and determination can challenge institutional power. That's a lesson every student in that auditorium will carry with them. Some will become military commanders. Others will join the council. Some will become professors themselves. And they'll all remember the day a human stood alone against the establishment and won. I wasn't alone, Marcus said. Thalmor, Zixara, Kreenox, you, Professor Dalrex, and dozens of others supported me. Yes, they did, because you gave them something worth supporting. You articulated what many felt but couldn't express. That diversity means nothing if we don't actually value different perspectives. That learning from each other requires genuine humility, not just polite tolerance. Rindal's communicator chimed. He glanced at it and smiled. You're being requested for interviews by 17 different Coalition news networks. Earth's planetary government wants to speak with you. 3 different military academies have invited you to guest lecture. And according to this message, your enrollment applications for advanced courses next semester have been personally approved by the Dean of Students. Marcus felt overwhelmed. I just wanted to prove humans belonged here. And you did. But you proved something more important. You proved that the Coalition still has the capacity to grow, to change, to become better than it was. That's rare, Marcus. Institutions this large, this old, this established rarely change direction. You bent the course of Coalition education policy. That's extraordinary. They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships navigate the traffic patterns around the station. Marcus thought about his sister's message about Earth watching and hoping, about the weight of representing an entire species. What happens now? He asked finally. Now? You study. You learn. You become the best strategist you can be. And then you take what you've learned and apply it. Rindal's expression grew serious. But understand this. You've made powerful enemies today. Velnara accepted defeat gracefully, but others won't. There are forces within the coalition that benefit from the old hierarchy. They won't forgive you for disrupting it. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying you need to be careful. Not paranoid, but aware. Political influence, academic sabotage, social pressure. These are tools that can be used against someone who threatens the status quo. But you also have allies now. Use them. Trust them. Build networks the way humans always have. Through cooperation and mutual support. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding dawning. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The hearing had opened a door, but walking through it would require constant vigilance and effort. I should get back, Marcus said. My teammates are probably wondering where I went. Go. Celebrate your victory. You've earned it, Rindal paused. Oh, and Marcus, I'm recommending you for a teaching assistant position next semester. Advanced strategic analysis needs someone who can present alternative perspectives. Someone who's not afraid to challenge students' assumptions. Interested? Marcus grinned. Absolutely. As he made his way back through the station's corridors, Marcus encountered dozens of students. Some offered congratulations. Others debated the hearing's implications. A few Veltari seniors ignored him pointedly, their crystalline forms pulsing with disapproval. But even their hostility felt different now. Not overwhelming. Just another challenge to navigate. His quarters were packed when he arrived. Thalamore had somehow procured food and drink suitable for a dozen different species. The celebration was already in full swing. Zixara waved him over to where she was explaining mantid hive mind coordination to a group of fascinated students. Kreenox hovered near the ceiling, his atmospheric suit humming cheerfully as he told stories about ethereal warfare. The hero returns, Thalmor announced, thrusting a container of something that smelled vaguely alcoholic into Marcus's hands. To Marcus Chen, who proved that humans are too stubborn to know when they're beaten, everyone laughed and raised their various drinking vessels. Marcus felt warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the drink. Lyra Shin approached. Her patterns shifting through colors Marcus had learned indicated thoughtfulness. I've been thinking about what you said, about humans being synthesizers of ideas. That's actually a strategic advantage we haven't fully explored. The ability to take concepts from multiple sources and create something new. That's innovation, Marcus. That's how civilizations advance. It's how any civilization advances, Marcus replied. Humans just had to get good at it because we didn't have other options. But every species does it to some degree. We're all standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. Spoken like a true scholar, Professor Dalrex rumbled from the doorway. The massive Craxian had to duck to enter Marcus's quarters. I came to personally congratulate you, Mr. Chen. What you accomplished today took courage. Not the courage to fight, which is common enough, but the courage to stand for principle against overwhelming opposition. That's rare. Treasure it.